cheap gasoline prices?
Well, it really depends on what state you're from, right? So in Cali, a lot of what you pay is in the taxes, right? So that's not likely to go away anytime soon, obviously in New York as well, and along the eastern seacoast. But toward the interior, you will have lower prices. Obviously, there's a lag to the downside. There's not as much of a lag on the upside when people raise prices, but you'll see that to the downside over time, and especially if, and this will continue into the summer as well, but I don't think anyone's going anywhere anytime soon.
So, Vince, are we going to see a wave of bankruptcies out of the shale patch?
Well, when I discuss it with our high-yield expert, Spencer Cutter, he believes that we're in distressed territory. You have operators that are highly levered, Paul, that will see this as the reality before them to restructure their balance sheet, restructure their operations. So, yeah, you're likely going to see more this time around in this downturn than we saw in 2014, 2016, because if you recall, during the last downturn, you had the banks bail these guys out. The capital markets are now shut, and we don't view this as an opportunity for credit, which is the lifeblood, to come back into this space anytime soon.
All right. Vince, if the May cratered over the last 48 hours, is it linear? Does the June crater at a certain point, like May 20, or does the June crater quicker, I should say?
Well, so look, I mean, you have an anomaly at this point, right? You have the physical markets and the financial markets reconciling. So the May contract rolls. The June is not going to be any different because you still have a boatload of oil trying to find a home, and you have capacity that's even less today than it was back in May. So you're likely to see June bleed down as well.
Bleed down, I like that phrase. Vince Piazza, thank you so much. Our expert on domestic oil, Vince Piazza, Bloomberg Intelligence. And so, Paul, absolutely extraordinary. I mean, sitting there yesterday, all of us on Twitter just observing some great charts out there as well. Just extraordinary history made.
Yeah, and as someone who doesn't follow the energy industry as closely as someone like Vince Piazza, I'm just like, why can't you just shut it down? I mean, you're losing money on every barrel you produce here, but like I guess a lot of these manufacturing, it's a complex process and it takes time, and it's hard to figure a strengthening demand scenario in the intermediate term, despite having some states in the U.S. and maybe even some countries in Europe talk about opening up again.
It's amazing. I'm looking here at the Bloomberg function, and Vince Piazza once again has single-handedly lifted oil. It's amazing how he does it. The June contract, folks, this is the West Texas Intermediate of tomorrow, was about $14.80, $14.90, and it's now $15.23 a barrel. The first time, Paul, I ever considered double-digit, $10, $12 lifting costs was an economist at Bear Stearns by the name of Lawrence Kudlow.
That's right.
That's how far back this goes. Larry was screaming about $9 oil because he was, working on the cost to get it out of the ground. That was a few years ago, Paul.
That was a few years ago, back at Bear Stearns when, he was making some pretty big economic calls.
Yeah, and we, of course, saw Mr. Kudlow in good health yesterday with John Farrow. That was an important conversation. The news flow, folks, is extraordinary. Please stay with us through the day for our news here, as well as market updates and important conversations on these many themes. We are produced at moments by Richard Truman at our world headquarters, 731 Lexington. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. We continue through the day. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constant.
Coming soon, Ricochet, the new action film written by, directed, and starring Euro Millions winner Timothy Barker, with music by Timothy Barker.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £14 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Oh. Just there, Dave. Smashing. Oh. Ah, great. Billy. Night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya.
Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung Rugged range.
Right now, TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre is just £25.50 a month, fixed for 18 months. Plus, you get a year of Amazon Prime on us. Over 80 Freeview channels, all the on-demand players, and average speeds of 38 megabits per second. Plus, unlimited one-day delivery, thousands of movies, TV shows, and more from Amazon. Massive entertainment package, tiny price. See more to spend on popcorn? Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk, for everyone. Offer ends 22nd of April, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dips?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Tuesday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. Coming up, we're going to take a look at this energy market. Oil continues to fall. What does it mean for inflation and the deficit? Plus, we're going to stick with oil and talk to someone about how negative oil prices might be signaling a more profound, broken global financial order. But first, let's go to Charlie Pellet of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Charlie, what do you have for us?
And good morning. Here's what's going on. What I got is breaking news from the Bloomberg. U.S. March existing home sales down 8.5% month over month to a 5.27 million rate. Again, that headline right now on the Bloomberg. Also reporting an earlier headline this morning, President Trump ordering a plan to make funds available for oil and gas companies. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all trading lower right now, with the S&P down 45. That is a drop of 1.6%. The Dow lower by 387 points, also down 1.6%. NASDAQ slumping 135 points, down now by 1.59%. Fresh bout of risk aversion gripping financial markets as stocks tumble for a second day. Oil resuming its historic plunge. We've got more on the oil story for you coming up right here on Bloomberg Radio. Among the companies reporting earnings, Coca-Cola says the impact of COVID-19 has made it impossible to predict what 2020 holds, although it does warn that its effect on the second quarter will be, quote, material. Sales volumes have declined about 25% globally since the start of April. That, of course, resulting from social distancing measures and lockdowns that have hurt sales primarily outside the home, as stadiums and entertainment centers, where the company gets about half of its revenue, do remain closed. Coca-Cola shares lower now by 0.5%. We've got gold. Right now, gold is trading little change. We've got more on the markets for you coming up in a moment. Got to mention the 10-year, the yield there, 0.55%. Again, recapping, S&P down 46, a drop of 1.6%. I'm Charlie Pallett. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thank you so much for that. And oil really is the story. And we're going to start with the dad joke of the day because so many people sent this to me and it's relevant. And I will just say Justin Paterno, who created StockTwits, which is this conversation for different traders online, he said, "What do you say when the market gives you oil for free?"
What do you say?
Sorry, no tanks. And that was something that Dave Wilson also flagged to me. The physical crude market coming into stark reality with the futures optimism, perhaps hopium, that is quickly getting eliminated. Dave, what is it right now that is buoying support for positive prices in the June contract as people look forward to a time of perhaps less production and perhaps a little bit more driving around?
Well, positive is kind of a matter of perspective there, Lisa, when you consider the June contract is down almost 25%, just above $15 a barrel at this point. So, you sort of have this natural process from 1 month to the next that, traders move out of May and into June or whatever. I mean, and that process has been going on for a while. It's just that it got really distorted with the drop-off in crude oil demand exceeding anything that OPEC or Russia or anybody else is delivering in terms of cuts in supply. So, you put it all together. I mean, you've certainly got oil taking a beating again today. What's interesting, though, is that at least some of the energy stocks have bounced back a bit after early losses. I was looking at ExxonMobil. It's only off 0.5% at this point. Contrast that with Occidental Petroleum, which is lower by almost 5%. And you can see that at this point, it's gotten to the level where, it's really not the energy behemoths that are taking the hit. It's the companies sort of beneath them and even smaller. And there are going to be issues for a whole lot of those companies when it comes to cash flow, when it comes to keeping up with debt payments, all kinds of issues that have really come front and center in the last several weeks now as oil's come down.
So, Dave, we are in earnings season. It just seems like more and more companies are withdrawing guidance, and I guess for good reason, because we're in, I guess, unprecedented scenarios for demand. But even, Philip Morris, I guess, is the most recent, along with IBM.
Right. I mean, and IBM really jumps out because the shares are lower by more than 4%. What's been interesting is I went back and looked at revenue relative to analyst estimates, and you see for the past 2 years now, one quarter they come out ahead, the next quarter they come up short. And it's been back and forth like that. Well, they came up short in the first quarter, revenue falling more than analysts were expecting. So, it's sort of the constant issue with this company. How are they going to build their business as everything in technology shifts? I mean, it's been all about cloud computing for the last few years now, and IBM is competitive in that area. But, they're going up against the likes of Amazon and Google and Microsoft, and it's been a bit of a struggle for them. And, they have a new CEO at the reins trying to keep the company going here, now that Arvind Krishna is in charge and Jenny Rometty has retired. So, IBM still has its challenges, and it's reflected in a stock that's down more than 4% in the wake of their first quarter results.
Yeah, sending earnings down double digits year to date compared to Amazon's stocks, up nearly 30%. Another share that's been flying high has been Netflix, as everyone sits home and watches as many screens as they possibly can. Yesterday, I actually said to one of my kids, just see if we can shove some more screens in between you and your face so we can just, complete the day. But that's how we're all trying to get through. I guess Netflix shares near all-time highs have returned more than 35% year to date. What are people looking for in terms of actually proving that they can make money in addition to being really blessed for perhaps single-handedly with a captive audience, Dave?
Well, I mean, the challenge for Netflix is, as it is with so many other companies, it's all about cash. I mean, Netflix has built up billions of dollars in debt as they've, expanded their programming, as they've moved internationally. So, those are the kinds of issues that really come front and center for investors. I mean, you look at what analysts are anticipating for the first quarter. Earnings per share almost double what they were a year ago. According to the average estimate of Bloomberg survey, you look at revenue, they're anticipating an increase of 27%. Now, you go through the numbers and analysts are expecting the sales growth rate to slow as the year goes on. But still, you get into 2021, they're anticipating an 18% increase. So it's a matter of whether the company can deliver on those kinds of expectations. I mean, given the jump we've seen in the stock this year.
So, Dave, I know this is a big week for earnings, and next week is actually the peak in earnings. When do the energy companies typically report? Because that's really going to be key, and we're going to really get a sense of who can survive this and who might not be able to.
They tend to be later in earnings season. Just looking at what we have here, ExxonMobil tentative at this point for May 1st. So you're talking, late next week there. Looking at Chevron, similar story there, May 1st. ConocoPhillips, you go through, and they're also next week, late in the week. So, we're about a week and a half away from really seeing how, the biggest energy companies look here, and then by extension, how the whole industry looks. I mean, given what we've seen in the crude oil markets and how it's played out in terms of companies' ability to make any kind of money here.
You know what's weird to me? I'm looking at the credit market right now. I've been watching high-yield energy bonds. They aren't down as much as they were back at the lows in March. And to me, that's confusing given where oil prices are. And I guess that's because people think that the Fed is going to provide some sort of backstop maybe to the market, or perhaps it's because the weakest links have already been sort of ironed out. This is a question mark to me. Why is there not a bigger underperformance in this area, Paul?
Well, you've got the story out today with the president talking about how his administration is working on a plan to help the oil industry, prevent the loss of jobs. So, maybe the fiscal backstop as opposed to the monetary backstop here.
Well, I mean, we've done that. We've heard that before from him, and he would have to get congressional approval for a lot of that funding. That's my understanding. I'm unclear on what he can single-handedly do in terms of buying reserves for the U.S. storage. I mean, these are all questions that we should explore going forward. Still remains to be seen how much of a backstop there is. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks Editor, thank you so much. Right now, let's turn our focus to Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager there with world and national headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, President Trump's latest response to the coronavirus pandemic is a new crackdown on immigration. In a late-night tweet, the president announced he'll temporarily suspend immigration in light of, in his words, the attack from the invisible enemy and to protect American jobs. He didn't give specifics on a time frame or who'd be affected, but National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien had more to say about it this morning.
The president's not going to be guided by politics here. He's going to be guided by the health, doing what's best for the health of the American people.
The Texas Democrat Joaquin Castro chairs the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. He tweeted last night the move is an attempt to divert attention from the president's failure to stop the spread of coronavirus. The move comes as several states, particularly in the South, take steps to reopen their economies. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is allowing gyms, barbershops, bowling alleys, and some other businesses to reopen as soon as this Friday. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms isn't sure this is the time.
I am extremely concerned about the announcement the governor made. I hope that he's right and I'm wrong, because if he's wrong, then more people will die.
This afternoon, President Trump meets with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to discuss coronavirus testing. The Senate could vote this afternoon on another round of stimulus funding to replenish depleted small business funds and to boost testing. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tells CNN, in his words, "We have a deal."
They're still dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but every major issue was resolved by the four of us last night.
The White House says a deal is close, but Schumer says he expects that vote to happen this afternoon at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Why can't you just go to some remote island and wait till all this is over?
The range of outcomes is so wide.
Because it's your job.
What do you think some of the structural changes might result?
Fortunately, it's our job too.
How's value done in this market?
Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
It's very hard to make a forecast.
Bloomberg Markets.
This could be a lower for longer type of hit.
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis.
The garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face to face. So it's time to get creative. With the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency. Life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work. But only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to National Lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Right now at the Halifax, wherever we're working from,
we're all working together to be there for you.
So our customers can apply for a payment holiday on mortgages, loans or credit cards.
And because we want you to stay home and stay safe,
we've created step-by-step guides to help you set up online and mobile banking.
Which is safer and easier than you may think.
But for those that really need to see us in person, we're keeping as many branches open as possible.
So however you need us at the Halifax,
we're here to help.
Terms and conditions apply. For more information, go to halifax.co.uk.
The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you! I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
I'm Mel Kiper Jr., and to get you ready for the NFL Draft, you can listen to my podcast, First Draft, as Todd McShay, Chris Sproul, and I highlight all the top picks and give you the analysis you need leading up to the draft. Just search ESPN Radio today.
TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Risk off is gripping financial markets as stocks tumble for day number 2. President Donald Trump says his administration, meanwhile, is working on a plan to make money available to the oil industry to prevent the loss of jobs after prices plunge below zero. On that news, oil edged, and I mean edged, back into the green. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 2%, down 55. The Dow's down 1.8%, down 438. And the NASDAQ is down 2%, down 170. The 10-year is currently at 15.30 seconds with a yield of 0.55%. West Texas Intermediate for May contracts, which expire today, is up 102% at 85 cents a barrel. Meanwhile, the June contracts are down 28% at 14.63 a barrel. The dollar yen stands at 107.68. The euro, $1.870. And the British pound, $1.328. Sales of previously owned U.S. homes dropped in March by the most since November of 2015, representing weaker demand that likely is going to get worse in the coming months as the pandemic bears down on this economy. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
As we watch oil prices plunge, the question is, what does this mean for inflation when you see that the Fed is trying to fight it with everything that they have? The idea of this disinflationary trend, the Fed would like to see more inflation. We are yet seeing inflation expectations fall. Once again, Ira Jersey joining us. He's been talking about the disinflationary pressures. He's chief U.S. interest rate strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. I want to start there. Given the price of oil, what we're seeing, how correlated has that been to inflation expectations in the near and long term and the Fed's ability to change that?
Yeah, so traditionally it's been very high. So the correlation between short-term inflation expectations, like 1 year and 2 year, is at times well over 90% correlated. Now, I think the issue with the current move is that even though front-end contracts of oil, so May, June, July, those are all coming down. But when you look at what the market's still expecting for oil in, say, January of 2021, it's still over $30. So the thing is, even though we might have a short-term dip in headline inflation because of what's going on with the spot oil price and the near-term oil prices, if they do go back up to those kind of 30-ish levels, then you wind up seeing basically an unchanged energy component of CPI. So actually today, ironically, and even yesterday, you didn't get significant moves in the market's expectations of inflation.
So, Ira, thinking about, all the money that the government is spending here in fiscal stimulus, how concerned is the Treasury market for, the U.S. budget deficit may quadruple this year to almost $4 trillion? How is that being reflected in the marketplace? At some point, we got to start paying this stuff back.
It's not being reflected at all, and in fact, it's just the other way. So, what tends to happen with treasuries, so unless you think that the federal government actually will be in default at some point in the future, what tends to happen is treasury yields tend to go down as the treasury is issuing more and more debt. And the reason for that is because they're issuing that debt into economic weakness. So two things occur during those periods. One is there's a lack of appetite for other fixed income assets, and people want to be in the safest assets, so they jump in and buy treasuries, and that's exactly what you've seen. That's the flight to quality bid that's been in a lot of the government bond markets over the past couple of weeks. The other thing is that when I think the expectation by the market is that the Federal Reserve will continue to be very large buyers of the Treasury market, and because of that, there's not a lot of impetus, and it's very hard to get short the market because you're worried that the Federal Reserve is just going to keep on buying and buying and buying, so you won't be able to profit from being short the market, except maybe in very short-term trades.
Ira, this is sort of a strange concept. The Fed has thrown everything it can think of and may try to throw more at the markets with its balance sheet expanding by $2 trillion in a month. You've got Congress expanding its deficit. And yet you have Citi analysts, rate strategists, saying that they don't think the Fed's views are expansionary enough, that they aren't necessarily easy and accommodative to the degree that would be required, given the shock that we're seeing to the economy. Do you agree?
So I disagree with them because I think that there's zero that central banks can do that will stimulate the economy without getting people back to work and having physical distancing rules change. At the end of the day, an economy is made up of transactions, and when you have a significant reduction in those transactions that are occurring, and I mean real money transactions, I mean just take me as an anecdote. I used to get gas once a week in my car. I have not gotten gas in a month, right? So you wonder why oil prices are low. Well, right there is the reason, and you do that over
it's
millions
your fault.
and millions.
It's Ira Jersey.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in part it is, and that's because of this physical distancing that we're all doing. So because our economic activity is lower by 10-20%, anything that the Fed does is not going to stimulate demand for credit growth, and that's what you need in order to. And that's how monetary policy helps, is that it helps people who want loans to be able to get them at much cheaper levels, and they just who's getting out a loan at this point to start a business or to buy a car? You can't go to a car showroom, so how are you going to buy a car? Right?
So, Ira, just quickly, we saw negative oil prices yesterday. Are we going to see negative interest rates?
Well, you have in a lot of places, and in fact, in Treasury bills traded negative earlier today. So you have. I don't think that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates to negative, but is it possible for T-bills to trade there on occasion? I think there is, just because of that flight to quality bid that the market's continuing to absorb.
Thank you so much. Ira Jersey.
Yeah, Ira, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate that. Ira Jersey, Chief Interest Rate Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. But you think about it, Lisa, I guess we never thought we'd see negative oil prices. And so the question is, as you look out to the yield curve, will we see negative rates here in the U.S. like they've been living with for so long in Europe and in Japan as well?
Well, we have seen, to Ira's point, we did see negative yields when you look at T-bills, basically. Right. People paying banks, paying the government for the privilege of lending for 3 months and the opportunity to get their money back in that time. The question is, will that persist as the government funds more of its deficit with T-bill issuance? I don't know. This is sort of the sort of key demand-supply question that's been playing out.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like more fiscal stimulus is coming. We heard coming out of Congress just today, maybe get that signed in the next several days, plus President Trump talking about stimulus for the energy space as well. So the government is certainly stepping up here in the face of this pandemic and the impact on the economy. S&P right now, we're down about 49 points, 1.7%, a risk-off day today. Uncertainty in the energy markets. This is Bloomberg.
This is the Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are falling, with the Dow down more than 350 points as chaos in the oil market continues. Crude fell below zero yesterday for the first time in history on rapidly filling storage tanks. Wells Fargo, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan, and U.S. Bancorp were sued by small businesses that accuse the lenders of prioritizing large loans distributed as part of the virus rescue package. The lawsuit claims the banks processed applications for the largest loan amounts because they generated the highest fees. Coca-Cola said the impact of the pandemic has made it impossible to predict what its performance will look like this year. Sales volumes have declined about 25% globally since the start of April. And the coronavirus has revealed a key weakness in the playbook for discount retailers like TJX, Burlington, and Ross stores. Almost no e-commerce. Though analysts have said they have enough liquidity levers to hold it over in the near term, stores now sit idle while the rent is due. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. In-depth analysis.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £47 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of April to play in the May draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus, conditions apply, play responsibly.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Right now at the Halifax, wherever we're working from,
we're all working together to be there for you.
So our customers can apply for a payment holiday on mortgages, loans, or credit cards.
And because we want you to stay home and stay safe,
we've created step-by-step guides to help you set up online and mobile banking,
which is safer and easier than you may think.
But for those that really need to see us in person, we're keeping as many branches open as possible.
So however you need us at the Halifax,
we're here to help.
Terms and conditions apply. For more information, go to halifax.co.uk.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. The best sports story all day, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. ESPN Daily.
Search ESPN Daily to listen.
I'm Mel Kiper Jr., and to get you ready for the NFL Draft, you can listen to my podcast, First Draft, as Todd McShay, Chris Sproul, and I highlight all the top picks and give you the analysis you need leading up to the draft. Just search ESPN Radio today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we'll hear from what has become the hallmark of this time, the briefings from New York Governor Andrew Cuomo as he discusses the daily tallies for the coronavirus outbreak in New York. Plus, we speak with John Authors about the broken market that is oil right now. What does it mean? Right now, though, let's head over to Greg Jarrett and get some numbers. Greg.
Sponsored by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth number one in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. The S&P has fallen as much as 2.2% in the session, with equity investors shrugging off signs that Congress is close to a fresh spending bill to fight the impact of the pandemic. The historic rout in crude rattled markets, with June's contract plunging. The president said that his administration is now working on a plan to make money available to the oil industry to prevent the loss of jobs after prices plunged below zero. The job loss was 51,000 in the drilling industry for the month of March. Right now, the S&P 500 is down 1.8%, down 52. The Dow's down 1.7%, down 401. And the NASDAQ is down 2.1%, down 178. The 10-year is up 13.30 seconds. The yield is 0.56%. West Texas Intermediate crude on the expiring May contract is currently up 107% at $2.60 per 42-gallon barrel. The June contracts are down 24% at $15.56 per barrel. The dollar yen stands at 107.74. The euro, $1.869. The British pound, $1.23.24. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg Opinion. Informed perspectives and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's 10:33 on Wall Street. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist John Authors. He covers the markets for Bloomberg Opinion. So, John, we're all trying to make sense of what's going on in the energy space. We saw negative oil trading on the May contract. We see June contract trading down over 20% here. What do you make about the energy markets, the turmoil we're seeing there, and what does that mean maybe for broader financial markets?
Well, you can never ignore events as extreme as what we've seen in the last 48 hours. This isn't just a technicality because it's the culmination of trends that we've seen developing for a long time. I think if you want to look at this in the very long term, by my calculations, this is the first time U.S. crude oil has actually dropped below inflation in the now almost took the dollar off the gold peg since the end of the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is in 1971. Ever since then, oil has been higher in real terms than it was then. That is no longer the case. So I think a financial system that has been anchored by oil and by independent central banks is reaching the point where something different is going to have to come in. If you want me to tell you what that's going to be, that is obviously a much harder question, but I don't think we can dismiss this as a technical accident simply because it has been so long in the making.
You know, John, let's try to get you a better line and see if we can get reconnected in a way where you're not breaking up. I think that John raises a really good question, Paul, which is, you know, what is this new world order as we see oil prices fluctuate to such a degree and go in sort of this ridiculous level of negative yield, negative pricing, which basically means that people don't know what to do with the oil that they're getting, and they're paying people to just take it for them as we get to the expiration of this contract. contract. A lot of questions about what happens next month. Do we see the same thing with the June contract as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. We had Vince Piazza on earlier, and he said from Bloomberg Intelligence, who covers energy, and he was suggesting that, if something doesn't materially change in that supply-demand dynamics, you very well may see that type of price movement on the June contract coming up. So, the question is really, it just seems like how quickly can the global industry cut production, because it doesn't appear that demand in the intermediate term, near term certainly, is going to pick up significantly. Even though we're having some states talk about reopening, we have some countries in Europe talk about reopening, but it doesn't seem like there's going to be a big demand stimulus in the near term.
Yeah, it just is sort of like a horror movie. There are these ships kind of slowly going toward the Gulf Coast full of oil from the Middle East. It's like the Jaws soundtrack accompanying them. It's sort of, where is that oil going to go when it lands? And we were talking earlier about how in North Dakota, gas stations, you can buy gas for 90 cents a gallon and still nobody wants it. I mean,
right.
Are you driving anywhere? Are you guys just going for joyrides for the heck of it, just so that you can get out of your house?
No, I mean, Ira said, he fills up his car typically, once a week. Now it's once a month, and that's about the same. There's just really nowhere to go. You can go for a little Sunday drive like you used to do back in the day, but there's really no place to go. So driving's down. I mean, you hear the traffic reports in the morning, in the afternoon, and the traffic reporters have almost nothing to report, because people are staying home.
Torsten Slok of Deutsche Bank actually put out a really good chart showing that 40% of oil demand comes from cars and trucks. And then, the rest of it, you have, your airlines and you have buildings and power. But I mean, the airline capacity, 90% decline in international flights. You have a 70% all around in capacity just generally. Nobody's flying, nobody's driving. And the question is, when is it going to come back? And without that, given the fact that it takes the likes of Saudi Arabia a while to actually get their pumping down, right? Because it's more of a process than perhaps even in the shale patch. What does that mean in terms of when we do breach storage? I mean, are people going to lease out their bedrooms for oil? This is not actually something you can do, as it is dangerous to do so without the proper supplies.
Yeah, and that OPEC plus cut of about 10 million barrels a day, on a total production, of 100 million barrels, it's just not that material when you're talking about demand down. What the experts are saying, 30 to 35 million barrels a day, or reduction in demand. That cut in needs to be even more on supply. One could argue, if you're just looking at it as simple supply and demand, more needs to be cut, maybe another 20 to 25 million barrels per day of production, and that is material, and that has to be presumably, that pain has to be shared by everyone, including the U.S., who is the number one producer of crude.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to get more details about what President Trump has to say. In the meantime, I was reading a story today about the Saudi Arabian budget, which has actually absolutely been decimated. They're expecting the worst situation financially for decades, as is the rest of the world for the most part, and trying to figure out how to proceed. And inflation expectations, again, not as down as much as you may expect, given the fact that people are expecting demand to pick up later on. Still a question of how much this is just also being influenced by Fed stimulus, by congressional stimulus, and stimulus from central banks around the world. Right now, we want to focus, though, on Washington, D.C. with that President Trump pledge for the oil industry. Let's turn to our 1991 studios there. Nathan Hager with the world and national headlines. Nathan.
It's not the only pledge we're hearing from the president, Lisa. He says he will sign an executive order to temporarily suspend immigration as part of the effort to contain coronavirus. The president made that announcement on Twitter last night, and we got this reaction this morning from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer on CNN.
Look, I think it's another diversion. The agencies don't even know what it is. No one knows what it is. Yesterday or the day before, we were talking about WHO. I think the president ought to stop these diversions.
Schumer says the focus should be on testing and contact tracing. The White House says the move is similar to travel restrictions the president imposed on China early in the outbreak. Schumer also says he expects a vote this afternoon on another round of stimulus, including new funds for small businesses, as well as testing and overwhelmed hospitals. Schumer says that vote could come at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. South Korea says it has nothing to confirm when it comes to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's health. U.S. officials who asked not to be identified say the dictator was in critical condition after cardiovascular surgery. The South Korean president's office says Kim is actually in a rural part of the country and engaged in normal activities. White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien.
We're monitoring these reports very closely, and as you know, North Korea is a very closed society. There's not a free press there. They're parsimonious with the information that they provide about many things, including the health of Kim Jong-un.
A former coach at UCLA has agreed to plead guilty in the college admissions bribery scandal. Justice Department says Jorge Salcedo admits to receiving $200,000 in bribes to help two students gain admission to the university. He's being convicted on one count of conspiracy to commit racketeering. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Whenever you're unsure of what to play next, head to the homepage and discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
They say singing can help you remember things, so here's some tips for parents out there during these tough times.
Number 1. Make sure your kids wash their hands for 20 seconds after they've coughed or sneezed or been outside. 2. Virtual play dates, social and physical distancing can help save lives. 3. Tell them they're safe and show your love and pride. Yes, we'll get through this together.
Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective podcast.
What about Giannis Antetokounmpo? He is going to be eligible to sign a Supermax extension, which we were projecting to be worth $240 million this summer. Well, if the salary cap drops, and even if he's wonderfully happy in Milwaukee, it may make no sense for him to sign when he can just wait a year and wait for the revenues to recover and then lock in.
Subscribe to Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective.
Search the Hoop Collective to listen.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Investors are suffering from a fresh bout of risk aversion that's gripping financial markets today as U.S. stocks tumble. Crude oil futures are gripped by turmoil and treasuries are rallying. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 2.25%, down 63. The Dow's down nearly 2%, down 467, and the NASDAQ is down 2.6%, down 222. The 10-year is up 15.30 seconds with a yield of 0.55%. West Texas Intermediate crude on the near contract for May is up 108% at $3.04 per barrel. For the June contract, down 28% at $14.79 per barrel. The dollar yen is at 107.75. The euro is $1.855, and the British pound $1.2287. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We are awaiting comments from New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, his daily COVID-19 briefing. And as we wait, we want to dig into the latest on the virus, on its spread, on the flattening of the curve, on potential remedies. Max Neeson covering it all for us, Bloomberg opinion columnist, covering the healthcare sector and everything that comes with it. Always wonderful to have your perspective, Max. Where are we when it comes to testing, given that this seems to be the crux of the issue when it comes to reopening the economy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, every day brings some degree of progress. There are lots of individual state efforts. The latest sort of renewed effort is an effort by the Trump administration to help states find capacity that they may not know that they've had. Now, the extent to which that those labs that they've identified, those platforms, actually translate to testing capacity that can get up and running, that's a little bit more uncertain. We've heard from at least one governor who says that not everything they revealed was something to get up and running right away. But again, something that every state and the nation as a whole continues to progress on. The issue, though, is meeting that much higher level that you need to get to a place from not just meeting emergent demand from people who are symptomatic or exposed, but to meet the demand of doing widespread surveillance and repeated tests on healthcare workers and on people trying to go back to work. That's something that you do still need a substantial jump to get to, and one that will take some time to get.
So, Max, I know we've heard from Dr. Fauci and others in the pharma industry 12 to 18 months for a potential vaccine. How about some of those antibody treatments that some people think might be a bridge to that vaccine in terms of getting people back to work? Where do we think we are on that?
So that is definitely something that has the potential to to arrive a little bit earlier, we're likely to start seeing the tests of some of those novel antibodies as soon as the summer. And that could put potentially us on a trajectory for getting kind of robust, potentially approvable data sometime in the autumn. These aren't going to be the kind of treatments where you can give it to the entire population of a state or a country. But in terms of acute patients, in terms of serving as a prophylaxis for people on the front lines, they do offer legitimate potential. But again, with that cautionary note that just as with vaccines, these are timelines that have never been attempted or met before for novel therapeutics against a novel virus. So even though it is a potentially shorter timeline, it's also absolutely not a guaranteed one in the same way that you can speak about that 12 to 18 month timeline. Again, the best case scenario where everything goes right, then you get these treatments on that quicker timeline.
As we talk about pharmaceutical production, there's a focus on supply chains, and this is an area that's come into focus, especially given the fact that trade has gotten cut off based on the virus and shutdowns. We have Canada coming out and saying that with key supply chains having to do with medicine, they want to domesticate more of those. How much do you think there is going to be a focus on relying on local production for pharmaceuticals that previously were outsourced to India and to China?
I definitely do think that just on a kind of national security basis, on a pandemic reaction basis, there is going to be some kind of move to try to do that. At the same time,
Max, I'm so sorry to do this, but right now Andrew Cuomo is speaking. Max Neeson, Bloomberg opinion columnist, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, kicking off his daily briefing on the pandemic in New York State. Let's take a listen.
A doctor, but not like a medical doctor, but still a doctor. To my left, Governor Kathy Hochul, my partner in state government, who has been a true treasure to the people of the state of New York. And to Kathy Hochul's left, Dr. Candace Johnson from Roswell Park Cancer Institute, which is where we are today in Buffalo. Roswell Park is one of the leading cancer institutes in the United States and a real jewel for the state of New York, and I thank her very much for their hospitality today. Let me give you some of the facts today. One of the points we want to make today is we're in Western New York, Buffalo. We've been talking a lot about New York City and the situation in New York City and Long Island and Westchester and Rockland, the suburbs of New York City. But just as we're seeing across the country, this virus presents a slightly different problem in different parts of the country. It also presents a different problem in different parts of the state. Overall, the total hospitalizations are basically flat from where they were yesterday. And as you see, the overall curve is on the way down, and that is good news, certainly. The net change in hospitalizations is down, not as down as much as we would like. Change in intubations is down, and that's always good news, because intubations means a person is on a ventilator. 80% of the time when people are on a ventilator, they don't come off the ventilator in a successful way. The number of new people in the state who walked in the door yesterday or were diagnosed with COVID is 1,300. That is down, and that's good news relative to really bad news, which is what was happening up until then, right? We have to remember our calculus of good, our definition of good has changed here. Good is now not terrible, but on an absolute scale, 1,300 people walk in the door with COVID on a single day in the state of New York. That would not be good news in any other context besides the context we're living in. This is Erie County. Buffalo is in Erie County, New York. And you see the numbers. We had a dramatic increase in Erie County, and then basically a leveling flat, little uptick yesterday. Number of total hospitalizations in Erie, 3-day average. Again, basically flat. These numbers, I would not take any of these one-day numbers, even three-day numbers, as absolute. This is a new reporting mechanism that just was put in place. So from a statistical point of view, I don't know exactly what the margin of error is, with all due respect to the great statisticians doing this. We've been watching the spread all across the state because this is like stamping out a brush fire. You need to run to where the fire is and put it out there. So we were watching for a spread of the fire from downstate New York towards upstate. Whenever we see a small fire starting, we jump on it right away, testing, isolation, etc. But that's remained fairly constant, and that's also good news. But the point that different regions of the country have different quote-unquote curves. The virus does not hit at the same time, at the same rate. So you hear about different states in the country, and when they're going to hit their apex, when they're going to hit their top, and when they're going to come down. It's different all across the country. It's also different across the state. We've been talking about states like they're uniform, homogeneous entities. Some are more homogeneous than others. When I was in the federal government, I worked in every state. So you have a whole different variety of states. This state, we have very different regions within New York. When you say New York, people think New York City. Yeah, one of the densest places on the globe. You also have upstate New York, where in some counties you have more cows than people. You know, people don't think of New York that way. So as you see variety across the country, we have variety across the state of New York. And you have to watch each one of those individual curves, and when does that region hit a high point, and where is that? Because depending on that region's curve is how you have to calculate your strategy. And you're looking at those curves. How long is the ascent up the mountain? And then how long are we on that plateau? And then how long is the descent from the plateau? Western New York, I believe we're on the plateau. All right, now the question is, how long are we on that plateau? And is it a plateau, or might it still ascend? Downstate New York, it appears that we're on the descent. And the question then becomes, in downstate New York, well, how quickly do we descend? The worst news, and the really ugliest part of my job these days, is telling New Yorkers this news. In Erie County, we lost 7 hospital deaths yesterday for a total of 125. In the state, we lost 481 people. 452 in hospitals, 29 in nursing homes. Again, nursing homes are a central focus and priority for all of us going through that. Where are we today? We're operating with 2 rules. First rule is do no harm. Second rule is start to plan the reopening. Planning the reopening is just that, plan the reopening. Understand it, calculate it, calibrate it. Nobody's ever done it before. How do you do it? When do you do it? But first rule, do no harm. We paid a tremendous price to get where we are today and make the progress that we have made today. We paid a tremendous price to control this beast. We closed down everything. People have worked tirelessly in the healthcare system and the first responders and the essential workers. You showed you can control the beast. Do no harm. Don't go backwards. That's the first point. And then plan the reopening. On the do no harm, you take a place like Erie County, any region in the country or in a state that is still on the ascent or on the plateau, beware of a hotspot, beware of an increased need. In this state, what we've said is any need anywhere in the state, the rest of the state will surge capacity and equipment and energy to help that part of the state. So when downstate New York needed help, upstate New York was there. If upstate New York needs help, or western New York needs help, or central New York or the North Country needs help, the rest of the state will be there. And you have my word on that. You know, in these crises, pressure brings out the best and the worst in people. I believe that. Individually, you get to really see how a person's responds at a time of crisis. You get a little snapshot of their character and of their foundation. It's also true of the collective. It's also true of society. And when I say we have to move to help Western New York, yeah, there will be some places in the state where you hear a voice that says, no, we have to worry about ourselves. We have to take care of us, and they're on their own the way we're on our own. Not in New York. That's not how we operate. Nobody's on their own. We are one state. We are one family. We are one community, and we're there to help one another. So whatever Erie County needs, whatever Western New York needs, you have my word that the rest of the state will be responsive. Hopefully we're on this plateau, and on the other side of the plateau is a descent, so we can manage it. But if it's not a descent and it's an ascent anywhere in the state, the rest of the state will be there. And part of it is testing. I know it's a granular topic, but it's important. We're also going to have a regional calibration that we're going to make on hospitals. You have many hospitals that are very quiet. Some hospitals are actually laying off people, believe it or not, in the middle of this because they have no patients. We are going to, we artificially stopped the number of patients going into a hospital because we ended what's called elective surgery, elective treatment. And therefore people can't go into the hospital for an elective procedure. In those parts of the state and in those hospitals where the hospitals are laying off people because they're so quiet and they have that capacity, and capacity for the virus is not an issue, we're going to allow elective outpatient treatment, which means the number of beds remain available because the number of people using those beds is still relatively minimal. And we're going to allow it in those hospitals and counties in the state that do not have a COVID issue or we couldn't need their beds in case of a surge. This will not include Westchester, Rockland, New York City hospitals, etc., because we have a real COVID problem there. It won't include Erie County or Albany County or Dutchess and several other counties where we still need to protect those hospital beds in case we need them for COVID. On testing, people need to understand this issue because it's going to be determinative and it's complicated and it's been somewhat politicized. And now you hear different arguments about testing. Here are the simple facts on testing. And again, testing is something that no one would have expected as an issue, right? Testing we do in this country, and nobody really noticed. We have a whole system. It's a private sector system. And when you went to the hospital and the doctor said you have to have your child checked for this, so you have to be checked for this, you go to a lab, you have your blood tested. That was the testing system. No one ever imagined this testing system was going to become hyper relevant to survival and would need a capacity of 20, 30, 40, 50 times what the system was doing. So this came out of the blue in many ways. And it's one of the lessons we will learn. But for us, it came out of the blue. How does it work? You have national companies that are private manufacturers of laboratory equipment, and their piece of equipment can operate their test kits, okay? And there are a number of these private sector companies. And they make a machine, they sell that machine to labs, a network of labs all across the nation. we have about 211 labs in New York State. They buy these machines from these national companies, and they then have that machine. Sometimes they buy a number of machines from different manufacturers, and now they have a number of different machines. Some have higher output, some have lower output, but each one requires that you go back to that manufacturer to get a test kit and reagent that works for that manufacturer's machine. Okay? So it gets very complicated quickly. There are different, what they call reagents, chemicals, that you need for each manufacturer's test kit and each manufacturer's machine. And the big labs will have bought a number of different machines from a number of different manufacturers, okay? So these are some of the big manufacturers, not all of them. You hear about Abbott, which has a new fast test. And these companies are all working to come up with these tests now, and who's faster and who's quicker, 1 hour test, 20-minute test, 15-minute test, 5-minute test. But every one of those manufacturers, you need to have their test kit and their reagents to operate on their machine. And you have some labs that have 5 or 6 different manufacturers' machines. When you go to the manufacturers and you say, I need you to increase capacity, many of the manufacturers are saying, I can't. I can't get enough reagents. I can't get enough swabs, these cotton swabs. I can't get enough vials. I just don't have enough material for my own test kits. That's the determiner of testing capacity, okay? And you're asking a system that, let's say normally did 1,000 tests. You're asking a system that did 1,000 tests. By the way, I need 50,000 tests. So they didn't anticipate this volume. And some of these manufacturers will say, look, I have a supply chain that is an international supply chain. I get my chemicals from China. I get my chemicals from here. So that ability to ramp up is what we're all struggling with. And every state is in charge of administering testing because the 200 labs in New York State are regulated by New York State. I regulate the 200 labs. It's only appropriate that the state should be in charge of actual testing in the state. I agree with the federal government's position on that. I have 200 labs. I should come up with a system that says how many tests in Buffalo, how many tests in Albany, how many tests in Manhattan, how many tests in Long Island. That's my business. I should be held responsible. I should be held responsible for making sure those 200 labs actually deploy across the state in a smart way. Hold me responsible. Where it gets hard is when the labs that I regulate say the manufacturers are the problem. And then I call the manufacturers, and the manufacturers say, I can't do it because it's an international problem. That's where we are now. Last night I get home. I have my 3 daughters with me now, which is a joy 99.9% of the time. We're sitting there, we're watching the news. Governor Larry Hogan comes on the news. Great guy, governor of Maryland, Republican, chairman of the NGA, National Governors Association, a vice chairman, so I work with the governor. And Governor Hogan says, I bought 500 test kits from South Korea. And there's a picture of Governor Hogan at the airport, South Korea airliner. And Governor Hogan says, I got 500 test kits from South Korea. And my daughter turns to me and looks at me and says, wow, that was really smart. And she just looks at me, doesn't say anything else. She didn't have to. I felt an immediate wave of guilt descend upon me. One of my other daughters, who was a little more pointed in life, a little more literal, said, why didn't you think of that, Dad? Why didn't you think of buying test kits from South Korea? So now I was really just feeling de minimis as a governor. Larry Hogan is a better governor. Why didn't I think of buying test kits from South Korea? Why didn't I think of buying test kits from Korea? Why didn't from China? It's not what states normally are responsible for. God bless Larry Hogan. He really thought outside the box and was very creative. But that piece is where the federal government can help us. Take that national manufacturer and that supply chain for the national manufacturers and let the federal government figure out South Korea and China and international supply issues. Rather than have 50 states now figure out how to go be like Governor Hogan and figure out how to buy tests in South Korea. That's where the federal government should help. And that's the intelligent distribution of responsibility on testing. So the federal government's right. The states should take the lead. Yes. Partnership, federal government, you have to help us with this national manufacturer and the supply list. After you do the testing, states have a second big task. Put together an army of tracers who then trace each person who tested positive, who did they contact, and then isolate those people who you contact. Also, talking about reopening, we're going to make reopening decisions on a regional basis, based on that region's facts and circumstances about the COVID virus. In other words, just like some states will reopen before other states because they have a different circumstance when it comes to COVID and their status with COVID, it's also true across the state. North Country has a totally different situation than New York City. Central New York has a different situation. We operate as one state, but we also have to understand variations, and you do want to get this economy open as soon as possible. And if a situation is radically different in one part of the state than another part of the state, take that into consideration. And that's what we're going to be doing. So the same logic that applies to the country applies to some states, this state, where you have those varieties across the state. And we need to take that into consideration. So the way we've been working on the economy in general across the state, where we recognized there's one state, yes, but there are regional economies within the state, and we've been working with each individual regional economy. We'll do the same thing on this phase. Let's talk about reopening economies in that regional context and coordinate it regionally. And that's what we're going to be doing. And again, I've said this statewide, but I want all our regional partners to hear us. Let's not talk about just reopening. Let's not have gone all through this and all we're going to do is go back to where we were. How do you use this as an opportunity to learn the lessons and to build back better? That's what we have to do. For Western New York, we have my partner, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, who, as everybody knows, is from Buffalo. We're going to ask her to take charge of the Western New York, monitor the public health issues, make sure if there's a problem in terms of public health, we're marshaling all the resources from across the state to help Western New York, and also to start to work on the reimagining and the reopening plan for Western New York. We're also going to ask Bob Duffy, who worked with me in the state, to volunteer to be a special advisor to coordinate public health and reopening in the Finger Lakes, the Rochester area. Last point, we've gotten through difficult situations before. Western New York, we went through 7 feet of snow a couple of years ago. That was fun. We learned from that. The state, we went through 9/11, which was a crushing experience, but we learned from that, and we're different and we're better. We went through Superstorm Sandy, and we are the better for that. And we're going to be the better for this. I believe that. It's the hard times in life that actually make you better and make you who you are. If you're intelligent enough to learn from them and to get the message from them. And that's what we have to do here. We have to do it individually. We have to do it collectively. What did we learn about ourselves, about the world, about the country from this period that we're in? And you get knocked on your rear end in life. Yeah, that happens. You get knocked on your rear end. It's going to happen. The question is, do you get up? And if you get up, what type of person are you? And did you learn from getting knocked on your rear end? Sometimes you get knocked on your rear end and you have nothing to blame. Things happen in life. Health issues happen. Bankruptcies happen. Things happen. You get knocked on your rear end. Okay. Get up. Get up. Have the strength to get up. Have the wisdom to learn from the experience and be a better person for it. Michael Jordan documentary is on TV. I'm a big Michael Jordan fan. He doesn't make the varsity team. Michael Jordan. Bad coach, maybe. But he got knocked on his rear end. He was disappointed. What did he do? He worked harder, practiced more. Michael Jordan wasn't just born. God didn't say, here he is. He made himself the great player that he is. And
we've been listening to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo giving us his latest statistics and update on COVID-19 in the state of New York. Governor Cuomo is in Buffalo today, Erie County, at a health facility there. So seeing another part of the state. He heads down later today to Washington, D.C. for an afternoon meeting with President Trump, where I'm sure he'll be raising the issues that are keen, Lisa, to the state of New York. So the update. I would say statistics continue to generally trend pretty positively, but cautiously positively in New York State.
Less terrible was the way that he put it.
Yep.
Not quite as terrible as it was, which is the good news, I guess, relatively speaking, just to say that he is going to be requesting potentially funds from President Trump as the New York plows through the cash that it has on hand to deal with unemployment benefits as well as some of the healthcare concerns. Right now, if you take a look at the market, what we're doing, we are seeing red across the board. The NASDAQ is down more than 4%, the S&P down 3.1%, the Dow down 2.6%. We got IBM earnings. They were disappointing. Netflix today after the bell. Next week, we'll get some of the big tech giants. A question as the dollar continues to strengthen in light of this flight to haven, flight to quality, is the fate of emerging markets. And especially given the fact that the developed nations really have been strapped on their own in dealing with the coronavirus. We're so lucky. Eric Fine joining us, portfolio manager focusing on emerging markets, fixed income strategy at Van Eck Global. We touched base with him yesterday after the IMF meetings and some of the focuses that everyone is looking at. I just want to start with the flight of cash from developing markets. How much appetite are you hearing from your colleagues and from, frankly, staff within your own company about putting money to work within the developing world, given the pain that we're seeing in places like the United States and Europe and the lack of willingness to take risk?
Sure. Well, thanks for the question. And so first of all, last week saw the first inflow into EM bond funds. So that's a narrow answer to your question. Second, I'd say more broadly, EM is different from the pre-global financial crisis EM. Before the global financial crisis, when I spent about half of my career, when something went wrong in the world, all the money flowed out, and that was the end of the story. After the global financial crisis, markets learned that having high real interest rates, independent central banks, good fiscal policy actually generated good returns. And so the big change from this IMF meeting compared to past crisis meetings was the discussion was very much who are the winners, who are the losers. Obviously, everything is kind of a loser, right? So it's going to be a big relative question to a big extent. But last week we saw the first inflows in general, right? I can't talk specifically about my company, of course, yet, because that's a matter of official and timing issues. But it hasn't been as bad as it's been in the past. And the other thing I'd say is official support. A lot of this official support is not just to their own economies; it's to the EMs, and that's also a big change.
So, Eric, we've seen just unprecedented volatility in the energy markets over the last couple of days. How does that kind of impact emerging markets broadly defined?
Great question. The problem with oil is it tends to correlate with everything. And when the markets see oil down, they think it's risk down because they think it's demand down. I think that's generally right, but I don't think that's the right characterization of why oil is down right now. It is about storage capacity, and it is about a supply shock, not necessarily a demand shock. So that's the broadest point I'd make. The second point I'd make is there are winners and losers. The consumption basket, the typical consumption basket in an emerging economy is food and energy. So a lot of these countries are seeing their inflation going down. They are not just a bunch of oil exporters. There are even some explicit winners, like South Africa strikes me. South Africa's complicated, and all these countries but they export gold, and 20% of their imports are oil. So the oil story generally correlates badly, and for legitimate reasons. But for me, it's all about the details. And there are winners and losers, and I was glad to see at IMF meetings that the focus was not, just exit and sell everything. It was very much careful analysis of country by country and what it means.
One of the biggest countries in this complex is China, and I've heard a real bull case made that China will recover first, given the fact that they were first to experience the coronavirus. And we did see signs of that in the economic data. However, they are now facing the decline in demand for the supply chain items that they have previously supplied, given the fact that the rest of the world is shut down. What's the prospect there?
Yeah, China is one of the most important countries, not just because it's the largest economy in PPP terms, or second biggest. But if you're going to see a V recovery anyway, it seems to me it's most likely a V-shaped recovery. Letters are probably not the best way to answer economic questions this time around, but it's the most likely to see a V. This is the biggest fiscal stimulus they've had ever, basically. The lockdown seems to have been working, and they're unwinding. And the early data, as you referred to, has been positive. Another key feature of China is it's acting as a global stabilizer. They are keeping their FX stable. That is a very unusual role, and it's an important anchor for the EM. You will also, I think, a big signal will be on whether the policy committee coming up gets delayed or not. The last one I'd say on China is look for lower rates. In our framework, real interest rates are too low there. But you know what? Frameworks, there's a time for frameworks, and there's a time for sort of more narrative, common sense thinking. I don't think looking at 0% or 0 is an extreme sort of grabbing statement, but I think much lower interest rates in China as it stimulates fiscally is a very, very reasonable question to be asking, and that would boost it. But I would say it's the likeliest V. There are some early signs, and so some of this optimism is not unfounded.
Hey, Eric, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your thoughts. Eric Fine, Portfolio Manager for Emerging Markets Fixed Income Strategy at Van Eck Global, based in New York City. So it's interesting, Lisa, you think about the risk that emerging market investors typically take on for that presumably better return. One could argue there's quite an amount of risk and potential return in more developed markets now, given some of the pullbacks we've seen and the volatility we've seen.
Yeah, I think what Eric was saying, though, about the details is important. The idea that lower oil prices will be beneficial for countries that import, even though they could decimate, say, the budgets of the likes of Nigeria.
Yeah,
an important
exactly.
consideration.
Yeah, exactly. So on one hand, it's good in terms of inflation. On the other hand, if you're producing that commodity, like a lot of the emerging markets do, clearly a big issue. Markets selling off today. S&P off 2.9%. We'll have more. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are dropping for a second day as the oil meltdown accelerates. The market is experiencing huge losses as the world runs out of places to store crude. West Texas Intermediate plunged below zero yesterday for the first time in history. Sales of previously owned homes dropped in March by the most since 2015, representing weaker demand that's likely going to get much worse in coming months. Contract closings declined to 8.5% from the prior month to 5.27 million. The Treasury Department has handed out $2.9 billion to the airlines, and there's more to come. The government reached rescue agreements with the four biggest carriers, American, Delta, United, and Southwest. More than 50 smaller airlines also will be helped. And Marriott's chief executive said the pandemic will change the experience of staying in a hotel. The company is working on new ways to protect guests and workers. That includes more rigorous cleaning and methods for keeping people further apart. Courtney Dunhope, Bloomberg Radio.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges. News and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. In-depth.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £47 million in prizes so far this year. And it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of April to play in the May draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus, conditions apply, play responsibly.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face to face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, video call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Typical Danny. Yesterday was just one of those days. I was running late to dinner, so I had to do my makeup on the bus. But my favourite shirt got ruined when I spilt my foundation all over it. What a mare. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up over the next half hour, we speak with John Kilduff, founder of Again Capital, on the oil market collapse. Plus, we'll speak with David Kotok, Chair and Chief Investment Officer at Cumberland Advisors, and how to navigate the current very opaque market. Right now, though, let's get a check on those markets. Greg Jarrett has that for us. Greg.
Lisa, stocks are taking another step down as the S&P falls just about 3% now, with equity investors shrugging off signs that Congress is close to a fresh spending bill to fight the impact of the pandemic. The historic rout in crude oil has rattled markets, with the June contract plunging as much as 42% after May contracts expiring today sank below zero for the first time in history. We take a look at those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is now down 2.8%, down 79. The Dow is down 2.3%, down 556. And the NASDAQ is down 3.5%, down nearly 300. The 10-year is up 18/30 seconds with a yield of 0.54%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil for the near contract is up 113% at $5.09 per barrel. The June contract is down 30.1% now at $14.15 per barrel. The dollar yen stands at 107.57. The euro is $1.865, and the British pound $1.2293. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, it has been an historic 48 hours for the global energy markets. We had WTI crude yesterday trading well negative for the first time ever. We're a little bit positive today on that May contract. That's the last day for the trading of the May contract. To give us a sense of what is going on in the global oil markets, we welcome John Kilduff, founding partner of Again Capital based in New York City. John, thanks so much for joining us. What does negative oil, negative WTI, what did that mean yesterday?
Well, it meant that there's just an abject glut of oil in the U.S., particularly here in the Gulf Coast and the Cushing, Oklahoma region, that any more additional barrels are having a problem finding a home. Basically, the folks who have storage all of a sudden found themselves not sitting on a oil tank, but sitting in the penthouse and were able to charge accordingly. In other words, not only am I going to get free oil, you're going to pay me to take your oil. And again, it's because of what's happened here over the past number of weeks now in this just crash in demand, both globally and here in the United States, where, for example, gasoline demand has fallen 50%.
So, John, I'm looking right now at the June contract, WTI, which has plummeted to about $14 a barrel. Just to give you a sense, back in March when things were not looking too pretty, they were at almost $24 a barrel, comparatively high. Where are we headed here? Are we going to see the same kind of trading activity in the June contract as we did the May one?
That's very much my sense that we will. I mean, this is going to be a steady march lower.
The physical market conditions are only going to worsen over the next several weeks for a couple of reasons. Even though we have the U.S. rig count plunging and we are starting to finally see some U.S. oil production get reined in and decline by about 700,000 barrels from the recent peak, by the way. But this market is going to have to stare down a massive amount of Saudi Arabian crude oil. The Saudis are going in for the kill here, it looks like, and to really just put a knockout blow onto our domestic producers, particularly the shale players, because they have 40 to 50 million barrels scheduled to be heading our way over the course of the next couple of months here that are going to compete for what little available storage space remains and use that crude to run it through their refinery here in Texas. That'll preclude them from what they usually do, which is buy at least some U.S. Gulf of Mexico produced crude oil. So this is going to get a lot worse still before it gets better.
All right, so give us a sense of what that's going to mean for the U.S. oil producers, the shale patch companies. You expect a wave of bankruptcies, consolidation, if in fact this does come to pass?
Unless the administration comes through with some kind of aid package, there's been some hint of that. Yes, there's no way around it. These negative prices are just they're problematic for even companies as large as Conoco and ExxonMobil, although they will withstand it and they will be on the other side of this thing and probably be the ones picking up the pieces here. You're going to see a consolidation and a concentration emerge in the industry where there's probably only be a handful of really significantly large players because they're the ones with the deep pockets that can afford to weather the storm and then buy out or buy these assets out from the auctions and bankruptcies that ensue.
So, John, you did mention President Trump's pledged support of the energy industry. So let's go there. President Trump tweeting earlier this morning, "We will never let the great U.S. oil and gas industry down. I have instructed the Secretary of Energy and Secretary of the Treasury to formulate a plan which will make funds available so that these very important companies and jobs will be secured long into the future." How much do you sort of foresee that helping things, given the fact that, yes, federal law does authorize the Energy Department to set aside emergency supplies, but the agency has only ever used about 2/3 of that capacity. So how much are we going to actually end up seeing here?
Well, I mean, for starters, Saudi Arabia has never been a friend of ours whenever there's oil market turmoil. When the prices are sky high, they're very slow to put more oil in the market to help us out. And then right now, I don't want to be over the top about what they're doing, but I mean, they are really coming at us hard here. This is not something that an ally or a friend or certainly a country that benefits from our protection should be doing. If I was the president, I'd urge the president to embargo their oil and keep these 40 tankers off and away from this market. But what we don't want to have happen here is for the oil industry to get wrecked, and then we find ourselves once again vulnerable to the policies of OPEC Plus and Russia. And we get a tight market where U.S. consumers get squeezed again. We go through the whole cycle one more time. That's what I'm concerned about. And I think to the extent that the administration can lend some kind of aid and prop up at least a portion of the industry, they should definitely do it. They should get oil into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I've always been an advocate of using that aggressively because we're up against the cartel. Release the oil when OPEC is tightening the spigot, and fill it up now when prices are super low, and we'll have an insurance policy in the future. So, hopefully they'll get aggressive on it in the administration. We can do something about this. This is not an entirely free market. That's the problem.
John Kilduff, thank you so much for being with us. John Kilduff, founder of Again Capital. On the oil markets, not entirely a free market, although you can get oil for free if you can store it somewhere. In fact, someone will pay you to take it off their hands, at least when it came to the May contract. Interesting to see whether we'll see the same dynamic again play out with the June contract. John Kilduff saying, looks like it's the very likely possibility given the supply-demand dynamic and the glut out there of crude. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager there with World and National Headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, the White House says it's about health. Democrats call it a diversion. That's just some of the reaction to President Trump announcing he's temporarily suspending immigration to try to contain coronavirus. The president tweeted last night he'll do it through executive order. White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien.
This is one step. It's not dissimilar to the restrictions on travel from China that he implemented back on January 29th at the very outset of this public health crisis.
Democrats say the president should focus on COVID-19 testing. That will be a big part of the discussion when New York Governor Andrew Cuomo heads to Washington this afternoon. Before he left, Cuomo renewed his call for federal help.
There are different, what they call reagents, chemicals, that you need for each manufacturer's test kit and each manufacturer's machine.
New York State reported another 481 coronavirus deaths. It now has 250,000 confirmed cases, but the number of daily infections has declined for a sixth straight day. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says a deal is done to provide another round of coronavirus stimulus. He tells CNN the bulk of it will be for small businesses.
We got $125 billion that will go exclusively to the unbanked, to the minorities, to the rural areas, and to all of those little mom-and-pop stores.
And the Senate Intelligence Committee just released the fourth volume of its report on Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. The panel says the intelligence community's conclusion that Russia meddled to help elect Donald Trump is accurate, thorough, and based on strongly sourced information and sound analytical judgment. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
The Bloomberg. Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout. Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone. Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn.
The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these
City.
and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one, not only.
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. The sports world is full of inspirational stories of heroic figures. It also has its fair share of shady characters. Aaron Hernandez, Donald Sterling, Bikram Choudhury, O.J. Simpson. For detailed retellings of some of the darkest sagas in sports, search sports documentaries on the TuneIn app.
I'm Mel Kiper Jr., and to get you ready for the NFL Draft, you can listen to my podcast, First Draft, as Todd McShay, Chris Sproul, and I highlight all the top picks and give you the analysis you need leading up to the draft. Just search ESPN Radio today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The risk aversion curve steepens and U.S. stocks tumble for a second day. Crude oil futures are embroiled with turmoil and treasuries are rallying. President Donald Trump has indicated his administration is working on a plan to make money available to the oil industry to prevent the loss of jobs after future prices plunged below zero. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is currently down 3.2%, down 90. The Dow's down 2.9%, down 678. And the NASDAQ is down 3.75%, down 322. The 10-year is up 18.30 seconds with a yield of 0.54%. West Texas Intermediate crude for the near-month contract, which expires today, is up 114% at $5.39 per barrel. The June futures contracts are down now 36% at $13.05 per barrel. The dollar yen is at 107.57. The euro, $1.866, and the British pound, $1.2289. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, one thing I think investors are beginning to become accustomed to in this coronavirus era in terms of the markets is volatility. I'm looking at the VIX right now, up a little more than 3 full points here to 47. That's a long way, certainly, from the peak of several weeks ago of about 80. But it's also a long way from where we've historically been trading in the 13, 14, 15 kind of level. So a higher risk environment for sure. Someone to give us some perspective. There's nobody better than David Kotok. He's a chairman and chief investment officer of Cumberland Advisors with about $3 billion under management. So David, thanks so much for joining us. I don't think we've really chatted much at all since this coronavirus has really become the narrative of not only our lives, but also financial markets as well. Would love to get your long-term perspective on kind of how you're thinking about this new world that we're in and how to allocate capital.
Well, thank you, Paul. We are hunker down as everyone else in the world who can hunker down is doing. Our view is a cash reserve in equity portfolios is necessary. In bond portfolios, highest grade credits, we are about to watch the dismemberment of the credits related to lower grade energy sector, and we expect that to be a worldwide phenomenon. And we have to wait for the elements that we know we must obtain, and they are testing, immune system enhancement, antibodies, vaccines, and robust, credible treatments. And as soon as we have those, we can open up and we can get back to work and we can eventually fully recover. We cannot recover before we have these things. And any attempts to recover before you have them is a high-risk gamut. We're about to test that in the United States, where we see people in bowling alleys in Georgia and on the beaches in Jacksonville and assembled at state capitals protesting. And we're going to find out in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks if there are infectious surges in those locations or tied to people who participated in those activities. We're going to have that evidence very soon.
And a lot of people are worried about what the economic damage would be from a resurgence of cases. You were saying that it's important to hide out in the safest of investments through this all, as there is a washout effect of the shutdowns. And we're seeing that certainly in the bond market today. 10-year Treasury yields back at near all-time lows, 0.54%. You've been covering Treasuries. You've understood the Fed inside and out for decades. Where do you think the 10-year yield is going? 25 basis points here?
Oh, I don't know, because the Fed is trying to follow a World War II model, Lisa. And the World War II model essentially took the Fed and said, we're going to help the Treasury finance all it has to finance. And we're going to become partners with Treasury. And we're going to set aside moral hazard discussions for later. We're going to set aside Fed independence for later, and we'll deal with that after the crisis. And that's what's at work. So in World War II, the Fed stabilized the entire Treasury curve within a few basis points, and it became predictable and a reference point. My expectation is the Fed will get to that here as well, and we'll have a positively sloped, full yield curve of Treasuries managed and stabilized by the Fed. I sure hope so, because that will then become a platform reference for high-grade credit for the entire world, and it is much needed right now.
David Kotak, this is fantastic and really interesting. In other words, yield curve control will be the policy from the Federal Reserve as it essentially monetizes the debts of the United States by buying up the excess treasuries that the U.S. government sells to plug its deficit. Given that model, how big can the Federal Reserve balance sheet get?
My estimate is the Federal Reserve balance sheet could grow to between 8 and 11 or 12 trillion, and it would be able to be financed and managed, and maybe larger. In World War II, once Pearl Harbor occurred and the Fed policy changed in 1942, it went on for 4 years. The Federal Reserve assisted the United States of America in financing the war, and the debt to GDP exceeded 100%. And it had to do it. And we were able at the end to be victorious in a war. This is a different kind of war, but the models are the same.
And federal finance is needed. It's needed in the states, in hospitals, in the cities, in agencies, in nonprofits for assistance to business, or else we will have a mass of financial failures and bankruptcies. And there's no reason to have them if the policy is to gap across the valley to the other side of the crisis, when science and medicine will fix this.
So, David, about 30 seconds, just give us your sense of what of the government's fiscal stimulus to date and what else you think needs to happen.
Well, we have $2 trillion direct. We have an argument of $3 or $4 trillion, which would be indirect, and we have a current debate for another $500 billion. My view is we'll need a number of more tranches of that, and sooner is better than later. So I hope politicians realize it and deliver it.
David Kotok, thank you so much for taking the time. All my best to your family and to yourself as you manage through this. David Kotok, Chairman and Chief Investment Officer at Cumberland Advisors, talking yield control, yield curve control, and that's actually something that a number of strategists are saying we seem to be headed toward, with the Federal Reserve buying the bulk of the Treasury issuance that the U.S. Treasury is selling to plug the fiscal deficit that we are developing to pay for some of these necessary bridges to get to the other side, Paul.
Yeah, and as David suggested, from a fiscal stimulus perspective, there's very likely going to need to be more, just given our sense of timing of how this may play out here. So, it looks like the government is going to have to remain pretty active here. The Fed has certainly done its job.
Yeah, that seems to be what's going on right now in Washington, D.C. NASDAQ down 3.5%, S&P down 3%, the Dow down at 2.6%. That U.S. 10-year Treasury yield, just kind of amazing to see it at 0.55%. This is Bloomberg Markets.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings.
Just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? Night, Steve. Yeah, see ya. Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung rugged range.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries, just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
The world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. We're going to start with the markets today because the stock market particularly is showing it's headed toward a worst result since April 1. And we welcome now Abigail Doolittle for a market check. Abigail?
Well, David, we are certainly looking at a bit of a sell-off at this point for stocks, having to do with that crude oil volatility and, of course, that historic move lower for crude oil finally bleeding into other asset classes. Because the 2 weeks into this week, if you can believe it, crude oil had been down both of those weeks down about 20%, so losing about 40% over that time period. The S&P 500 at that time, though, up about 15%. So today we are seeing declines for stocks, again caused by that move lower for oil, which has to do much with the virus crisis and the demand destruction. Plus, some folks are talking about the idea that for that May contract, there's no storage. But take a look at the June contract, absolutely plunging as well, $13 per barrel, down 35% on the session. So the carnage that we've seen for oil is not over. Not surprisingly, we do have a rally for bonds as investors are seeking for safety. But the bigger question here, David, is it seems that crude oil is really pricing in some sort of a deep recession, maybe even something worse, whereas stocks on the year, the S&P 500 down, but down just about 10%, perhaps still pricing in that V-shaped recovery or the U-shaped recovery. Which side is right? It's unclear right now. Perhaps the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Okay, thank you so much to Abigail Doolittle for that market check. In the meantime, it's clear that President Trump really has inherited a major crisis in the White House. We bring in now somebody who's familiar with dealing with crises. He has served as the White House Chief of Staff as well as Secretary of Defense and head of the CIA, among other major positions in the U.S. government. He is Leon Panetta, and he also is the founder and the chairman of the Panetta Institute. So, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being with us. First, give us your view from 40,000 feet. You have dealt with crises inside of government. How is the Trump administration doing as they look at this balance between public safety with public health on one hand and bringing the economy back on the other? A difficult problem for anyone.
There's no question that it is a crisis of immense proportions that the White House is having to deal with, and it is the kind of moment in time where the President of the United States really does have to have the best advisors around him, familiar with what the challenges are here, both in healthcare as well as with our economy. But more importantly, I think the need to really unify the leadership on Capitol Hill, and for that matter, unify the country. This is a crisis very similar to the kind of crisis we faced 75 years ago as we came out of World War II. And it really does demand, I believe, the kind of full-scale national mobilization and leadership that is critical to being able to solve this problem. I'm not sure that having 50 different states, 50 different governors dealing in their own way with this crisis is going to be the ultimate answer to dealing with the coronavirus.
Well, it's an interesting point because we do have 50 different states, but at the same time, we may be seeing a bit of a competition already with the state of Georgia saying, let's get back to it right away. Other states saying, no, that's way too fast. We're worried about our personnel. Can the government, actually, federal government, really direct the states about when they can open up their economies?
Well, I think the President of the United States, in providing the guidance that has been provided at the federal level about the steps that need to be taken in order to deal with the coronavirus, has taken a very important step. And obviously, the healthcare advisors have made clear what needs to be done in order to try to protect the safety of the American people as we try to reopen our economy. But I think the president, I think as the commander-in-chief of this country, has to really make clear that everybody has to follow the same standards in terms of arriving at the point where they're going to open their economy. I don't think we ought to allow people to just shotgun this thing. I think the President of the United States has to be very clear that he's going to protect the entire country. And the coronavirus
is very much something that doesn't recognize borders, whether they're state borders or national borders. This is something that's affected the entire world. And as a result of that, it is very important to have national leadership provide national standards as to how we're going to address it.
And essential in making any of these very, very difficult public health decisions is accurate information. Right now, it appears that we don't have the testing information we need. We're told that there's capacity either here or coming online, but many people think it's way short of what we need. Is the federal government doing all it can do? From your experience, are there other things it can be doing to make sure we can get all the testing done we need? Because it's tens of millions of tests, apparently.
No matter who you talk to or what you read in terms of how do we ultimately get out of this crisis, the answer still comes down to what I call the 3 T's, testing, tracing, and ultimately treatment. And testing is going to be absolutely essential to our ability to begin to really open up our economy with some sense of confidence about what's happening. You can't just roll dice here. You've got to be able to get an information base as to how many people have the virus, how many people have had the virus, how many people are healthy, so that we know for a fact that when people come together, we know what their history is. That's going to be the reality. That's what's happened in South Korea. That's what's happened elsewhere, is their ability to get an information base that allows us then to know, when you're going to put people together, whether or not they have the virus or they don't have the virus. We need that information. We can't gamble that somehow we don't need to know that information. And for that reason, testing is absolutely essential to that capability.
Mr. Secretary, even as we in the United States and countries around the world deal with the coronavirus, there's also major issues of national security. And I want to draw your attention and draw from your experience as Secretary of Defense and also head of the CIA to what is or is not going on in North Korea. We didn't see Kim Jong-un 6 days ago for that big holiday, his grandfather's birthday. That's very unusual. And now there are reports, unconfirmed reports, he may be ill or even worse. How do you assess it?
I think we always have to be very careful about reports coming out of North Korea. The reality is it is a very hard target in terms of really getting credible information about what really is going on in North Korea. And for that reason, I think we just have to be very careful to make sure that we have the best and most credible information possible in trying to look at that situation. If it is true that Kim Jong-un is very ill, it could have very significant impacts in terms of what happens with North Korea. It becomes a dangerous moment because, very frankly, the Kim family has been the sole regime in North Korea for over 60 years. And if the Kim family is not around, there could very well be a play for power in North Korea, and we don't know what the direction would be. So I think the first thing is to try to get the best information possible about what exactly is going on in North Korea.
As far as we know, and it is very difficult to know what's going on in Pyongyang, is Kim Jong-un really in charge, or does the military run the country?
Well, there's no question that Kim Jong-un has tremendous power in North Korea.
This is a special report from Bloomberg Radio.
We interrupt our regular programming, Balance of Power, to bring you an update on COVID-19 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now, Governor Charlie Baker.
Positive cases per day. More and more COVID-19 patients are being admitted to our hospitals. Our healthcare system is keeping up, thanks in large part to a ton of planning and your efforts to stay home, socially distance, cover your face in public, and work remotely. But the data shows we're still very much in the grips of a pandemic here in Massachusetts. Now, I know that's hard to hear and it's hard for me to say. But there are many unknowns about COVID-19, and our healthcare experts and epidemiologists are learning more every day. But what we do know is that there's no cure, There's no vaccine, and the COVID-19 is an insidious and at times invisible virus. The facts on the ground tell us that we need to stay strong, continue to socially distance, and stay home. While we ask for your full cooperation to get this job done, please know that we're working hard to think about a strategy to reopen the economy. We'll have much more to say about this in the days ahead as we pull together the best and brightest minds from our business and public health and academic communities to work together to put together a thoughtful framework that can work in Massachusetts. I think we all want to move on from this. Believe me. But I think it's really important for people to understand what's at stake. I can't wait to see my 91-year-old dad again, but I don't want to see him unless the circumstances and the situations and the rules of engagement are right, and that the data, the prerequisites about what's actually going on the ground here in Massachusetts support that kind of thing. Doing it wrong could create more hardship for everyone in the long run, and we're going to do everything we can to avoid that. So right now, people need to dig deep and stay put. Please only go out when you need to, and wear a mask or cover your face in public, especially if you're in a position where you won't be able to physically distance. We are all in this together, Massachusetts, and we will come out the other side of it stronger than ever. With respect to testing, yesterday the Commonwealth conducted 7,157 new tests. That brings us to a total of around 169,000 tests. The state reported 1,566 new cases of COVID-19. The last few days we have seen fewer positive cases day to day, but it's too soon to draw a conclusion from that data. First, a few days does not represent a trend. We've said that many times. And we have seen the data bounce around over the course of more than a few days. Second, the number of positive tests is entirely dependent The last few days we have seen fewer positive cases day to day, but it's too soon to draw a conclusion from that data. First, a few days does not represent a trend. We've said that many times. And we have seen the data bounce around over the course of more than a few days. Second, the number of positive tests is entirely dependent on who gets tested. And what I mean by that is the daily
Okay, we are experiencing some technical difficulties with our feed from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Governor Charlie Baker has indicated that, along with everyone else, he wants to move on from the lockdown, but he says Massachusetts will wait until scientific data supports reopening the economy there and letting people out. Baker advises citizens to continue to hunker down and wear a mask. He goes on to say that there were over 7,000 new tests conducted over the past couple of days, with fewer positive cases day to day, but he will not call that a trend. He wants to wait for things to even out for some time before he makes any official announcements. Again, we've been listening to Governor Charlie Baker of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We now return to our regularly scheduled programming, Bloomberg's Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Basically with contract expiring today, did not want to become physical buyers and have to take title to that oil. And so there was a massive amount of selling by those financial buyers yesterday, and just simply no buyers to buy those contracts. And so that caused, obviously, the decline in oil prices yesterday. And obviously today we're seeing a little bit of a bounce back, but in the forward curve, as you highlight, the forward curve is starting to see some pressure as well as investors become concerned about us increasing inventories to a level where we will no longer have any more available capacity.
I suppose, Rob, one of the questions most of us have is how much of this is sort of technical, as it were. We had a lot of traders who didn't want to take physical delivery of oil. They were coming to the deadline, as opposed to really the market's telling something longer term, pretty troubling actually about where the economy overall is going. Because as you say, it's largely a demand issue, how much economy will be there globally to take up this oil.
Yeah, that's a very good point, David, and I think that's really important for everyone to understand. You're right. The short-term price decline yesterday, I would agree with you, was very technical. It was because of the things that you highlight, the need to get rid of those contracts. You didn't have to accept physical delivery. When you look at the economy, no doubt that obviously the economy and demand for oil will be lower for a little while here, and that's why oil prices are lower. But also keep in mind on the other side of the equation. We have an oversupplied oil market today, and probably have an oversupplied oil market for a little while. But eventually, we're going to have an undersupplied oil market, and the reason I say that is because of the OPEC Plus production cut agreements that is in place. It's in place for an extended period of time, not just for a few months. It's actually in place for a few years, frankly. That will help keep supply down as demand returns, and that will be a positive for oil prices and bring them back to levels that are a little more beneficial for both consumers as well as producers.
So, Rob, today President Trump tweeted out, as you well know, that we cannot let the oil industry go under. And so he's instructed his Secretary of Treasury and his Secretary of Energy to get together and come up with a plan to support the energy business in this country. What sorts of things can they be thinking about? What should they be thinking about?
Well, I think the biggest we really need a bridge for this inventory capacity and how do we deal with this? What hopefully is a very short-term scenario where we have excess this excess supply, or this oversupplied oil market, and what do you do with that excess oil? And that's really the challenge around the world. Everybody's trying to figure out is where do we store that oil? And so finding additional locations or places like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to store that excess oil that's being produced today will help balance things. Longer term, producers are actually making adjustments in the U.S. already. Producers announced last week, a few of them announced that they were curtailing or shutting in production. What that means is they're just slowing. They're not going to produce or reduce their production by 20 to 30% in the short term here. That will and actions like that will, from the producer level, will actually help balance this market as well. And so, kind of in a really volatile time right now, but the market is responding and looking to balance the market in the best ways that it can.
At the same time, energy stocks have not been hurt as badly as some might have thought.
Yeah. So I think when as energy investors, or just as investors in general, I think if you look at the forward curve for oil and energy is more than just about oil, by the way. There's other opportunities in natural gas that actually could benefit from lower oil production. But let's just talk about the impact on oil and why energy, even though oil prices are down, energy stocks are not down as much. The forward curve for oil prices is substantially higher. As you highlight, the June contract at $13, the May contract at $5, but contract 6 months from now is at $30, right? So I think, and that's been fairly steady, plus or minus. It's been as high as 35, but it come back down to 30 most recently. So it has come back down, but energy investors, I think, and investors in general understand that oil prices at their current levels, $5, $13, that's not going to work for anybody around the world. And we have the adjustments that are in place to take this oversupplied market that's causing these higher inventories and these lower prices, and having that the adjustments that will be made to reduce that inventory over a longer period of time, which will ultimately result in higher oil prices.
Okay, really appreciate it, Rob. That's Rob Funnell. He's a portfolio manager at Tortoise Capital on oil. We're going to have much more on oil coming up later in the program because we're going to talk with the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Dan Barrett, one of the people that President Trump has told to help figure this out. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at Babbel.com.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Typical Danny. Imagine trying to unwind at a spa weekend and you wind up getting your mud pack all over your fave personalised dressing gown. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to National Lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
The North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, raised eyebrows when he didn't show up for the biggest holiday of the year in North Korea. That's the birthday of his grandfather. And then there were rumors over the weekend that perhaps Mr. Kim Jong-un is ill, maybe even worse than that. And so there really is raised questions about what is the future for North Korea. We turn now to an expert. She's Ms. Soo Kim. She's a policy analyst at the RAND Corporation. She specializes in North and South Korea as well as Southeast Asia and other parts of the region. So, Ms. Kim, thank you so much for joining us. What do we know? What don't we know about what's going on with Kim Jong-un right now?
So I think we could say with a moderate level of certainty that there is something that is amiss with North Korea right now. We cannot conclude once and for all that Kim Jong-un's health is really to the point of destabilization. Based on the reporting, nobody really knows exactly what is going on. In the past, when the regime had health issues with the leader, under Kim Jong-un, they would try to either deny or to prove that their head leader is alive and well and fully functioning, and going on these site visits to assure the domestic audience and also to show to the external world that we are in fact stable. This time, it's been over a week since we've seen Kim Jong-un make his public appearance. The regime has not really made this clarification as to whether or not his health is in good condition or if it's in poor condition. So at this point, I think one thing that we have to keep in mind is that absolutely we still have no way to confirm whether or not his health is in this destabilized, grave situation as the U.S. media and some South Korean media have pointed out.
So if, in fact, there is a regime change, and we don't know that there will be in North Korea, do we have any idea where it may go? Does he have an heir? I mean, he's a relatively young man.
That's a very important question. I think I checked social media this morning, and a lot of people who study North Korea have been speculating as to what would actually happen. There is no designated heir apparent right now because Kim himself is a relatively young leader. I understand that he has possibly several young children, but they are way too young to be even considered to be groomed or designated as a possible successor to their father's throne. There's speculation that his sister, given that she is considered his confidant, she might be up for the heir apparent position. But again, this is all speculation by the Western observer, so we do not know for sure. I think that whether or not whoever gets to assume leadership, that's an important question, obviously. But I think that the heart of the matter is that when there is a transition, whether or not it's going to be a smooth one or one that's destabilized, where there's no leader in place, and that leads to destabilization. The fact of the matter is, there's going to be many repercussions. The COVID situation right now demonstrates that. Let's say that this pandemic spreads, and it just changes a lot of things in the dynamics, not just from people to people within one country, but the way we handle, let's say, the humanitarian situation with North Korea. If there is a collapse, if we see, an outflow of refugees from North Korea out into the North Korea-China border and so forth, there's just so many different parts that I think from a perceptual angle, we think about it a lot and we talk about it a lot, but I just don't know whether or not we are fully, as an international community, ready to really tackle it.
How could we get ready? I mean, where is the expertise? Is it in China? Is it in South Korea? Is it in our own State Department?
Well, I think given that North Korea, the nuclear weapons, the missiles, the illicit, activities, the humanitarian issue, human rights violations, no single country is able to just take control of the North Korean crisis, the North Korean puzzle, and solve it by itself. It does require, I would say, a regional and a multilateral approach because there are so many moving parts.
Right.
At the same time, I think that given that, North Korea and South Korea, they share a border, U.S. is involved in potential peace talks and so forth, there's going to be certain countries that are going to be at the helm and other countries that would play a more supporting role.
Okay. Thank you so very much. That's Ms. Sue Kim from RAND Corporation. Coming up here, we have Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa on the plan to vote on a new spending bill this afternoon in the Senate. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are falling over 2%, and there's not much relief from the selling of crude oil. After yesterday's collapse into negative pricing, today trading was halted several times because of extreme volatility. Right now, West Texas Intermediate crude is at $4 a barrel. The Dow is falling 600 points, S&P down 81, the Nasdaq falling 295 points. Senator Chuck Schumer says the Senate is likely to pass a $500 billion stimulus bill today with more money for the small business program that ran out of money last week. And with all the government bailouts and lost tax revenues caused by the coronavirus, a watchdog group predicts the nation's budget deficit will quadruple this year to almost $4 trillion. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. For Bloomberg First Word News, we're going to go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you very much. Americans will soon be able to test themselves for COVID-19 at home. The Food and Drug Administration has approved the first home testing kit. Officials say it's just as accurate as one you get at a doctor's office or at the hospital. Patients will collect samples and send them to LabCorp for testing. The kits are expected to be available in most states with a doctor's order in the coming weeks. President Trump will meet at the White House today with New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo. The two who have sparred in recent weeks are expected to talk about ways to step up virus testing. Governor Cuomo says ramping up testing is a key to lifting restrictions and reopening his state's economy. The governor and other state leaders want $500 billion in aid to offset outbreak-related revenue shortfalls. Britain's parliament went back to work today, and the political authorities had a message for lawmakers: stay away. UK legislators and most parliamentary staff were sent home in late March as part of a nationwide lockdown to slow the spread of the coronavirus. House of Commons Speaker Lindsay Hoyle presided over an almost empty chamber with space made for a maximum of 50 of the 650 members of the UK Parliament. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks very much, Mark. Well, today's a big day in the United States Senate. It is scheduled to have a vote at 4 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Time on a new spending package, reportedly including $350 billion in additional funds for small business, as well as $75 billion for hospitals and $25 billion for testing. That is supposed to happen. We've been told conflicting things. The minority leader, Chuck Schumer, said earlier today that they had a deal. Then we had Steny Hoyer, who's the number 2 on the House side on the Democrats, saying, well, they're close to a deal. They're not there quite yet. At the same time, there's a great deal of urgency for this because, as we know, earlier the Congress approved $349 billion for small businesses that went out the door very quickly. They ran through all that money, and now they're trying to appropriate another $350 billion. At the same time, they have to think about what happens to the state. That's a different issue, which will be the 4th round on this, is the plan. So that's what we're waiting for out of the United States Senate. And we are going to be talking with Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa about what's going on in the Senate shortly. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. I'm sorry. I'm told now we have Senator Chuck. Hello, Senator Grassley. Can you hear me, sir? It's David Weston somewhere in New York. How are you, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
I was just talking about the fact that the Senate is scheduled to vote on a... Great. I was just saying that the Senate, as I understand, is scheduled to vote on a spending package this afternoon at 4 o'clock. You will be an important part of that, of course, as part of leadership on the Republican side. Do you expect a vote this afternoon, and do you expect it to be approved? Is it unanimous consent?
It better be, because without senators being in Washington making a quorum, and this is the only way to get it done and get it done quickly, and it should have been done 10 days ago, but Democrat opposition kept it from passing at that particular time. So just for your public that wants to know how we can do something with one senator on the Senate floor, Senator Schumer calls all 47 Democrats, McConnell calls all 53 Republicans, and it's called the whip line. And if nobody objects, then a bill can go through by unanimous consent. And we've had telephone conversations with McConnell as Republicans, and I'm sure Schumer's done the same thing with Democrats to discuss this pretty thoroughly. So getting the $310 billion for small business is very important. We had to agree to Democrats for more money for hospitals, which probably would eventually be needed, but isn't needed now because there's still $70 billion for hospitals that haven't been spent, and then an additional $25 billion for testing. And I think if it's those three things and not anything else to cause trouble or disagreement, then we ought to be able to get this through at 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Okay, Senator Grassley, give us some sense of the first $349 billion which has been disbursed. How much did that help small businesses back in Iowa, your home state? And will this other $350 billion, if that's the number, will that take care of the problem?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me explain that when we put the first $350 billion up 3 weeks ago, the CARES Act, we thought that it was an amount of money. Before a few days had run out, we knew that we would be out of money April 17th, so that's last week. So even before that, that's when we were ready to get it passed. So you're asking me, will this additional $310 billion be enough? I would assume so, but we might be shocked.
Senator Grassley?
To find out.
Senator Grassley, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. Senator Grassley, this telephone connection is really breaking up, so we're going to try to fix that. We'll come back to you shortly. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
What began in China as
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Stay in touch with your loved ones with great phones at great prices from Tesco Mobile. Like the incredible iPhone 7 with advanced HD front camera. Perfect for video calling. For just $13.99 a month. That's our lowest ever price. Search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 14th of June. Was £15.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phased policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
A fresh bout of risk aversion has gripped financial markets as U.S. stocks tumble the most in almost 3 weeks. Crude oil futures are going down as well as treasuries rally. The S&P fell more than 3% with equity investors shrugging off signs that Congress is close to a fresh spending bill to fight the impact of the pandemic. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is currently down 3.25%, down 91. The Dow's down 2.3%, down 656. The NASDAQ is down 3.8%, down 323. The 10-year is up 17.30 seconds with a yield of 0.55%. West Texas Intermediate crude for the May contract is up 111% at $4.15 a barrel, while June contract is down 44% at $11.58 per barrel. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. Nobody's ever seen what's going on today in the oil market. We went into negative numbers for futures and WTI yesterday. So Alex Steele, our colleague, sat down with Lord John Brown, former head of BP, and got his views on what has happening in the oil market.
Production will come down, certainly in the States, as new production is not added to the future. Demand, I think, very sluggish indeed. Will take a long time to recover. Obviously, it's down very heavily at the moment, around about 30%. But even it'll come back, I think, slowly, as people will be very reluctant to consume at the rate that they have been consuming before the behavior of people changed as a result of the virus. So I think
no doubt.
Would be not surprised if you look at oil prices being much lower for longer.
So based on that, the Texas Railroad Commission is going to have a meeting today where they're considering prorating cuts for Texas. Should that happen based on the scenario just laid out?
Well, that could happen. It's an unusual thing to do. I do recall when I first joined the industry that the Texas Railroad Commission was very active in managing production, and they may well do that. But even that, and combined with the cuts that have been promised by OPEC Plus, that will dig into, let's say, only 10 or plus % of oil supply, whereas we are producing probably 30% too much at the moment. So it will help, and none of that started yet. It will help underpin the price a bit, but the price, I think, will be sluggish for a very long time.
And you brought up OPEC Plus. There is conversation that they're going to move their cuts forward, maybe even take it deeper. The 8.5 million barrels of oil a day, Saudi Arabia has not really wanted to go below that, but maybe that could happen. Anything like that do a bigger dent or help price support even more?
Well, I think you really have to dent production a lot to support the price, but in the end, that's not sustainable. And it's exactly what we saw in 85 to 86, when eventually the cuts were not sustainable. People opened up the taps and the price of oil stayed low for about 17 years thereafter. There was a lot of oil. So it depends on the rate of growth of demand, and demand, I think, will, as I say, I can't see this growing very steeply for a very long time. So I think all of these are temporary things that underpin the price.
Yeah. I was saying, Lord Brown, could you help me understand the roadmap to then stronger demand? As in, do gasoline inventories need to come down, then refining margins improve, then we finally soak up some of the oil in the market? When we talk about demand recovery, what's the actual process of that?
Well, it is just that. First, it is underlying demand for economic activity. Bear in mind that the rate of growth of GDP determines the rate of growth of oil very slowly. We are getting more and more efficient at using oil. Every year, we use 1.5% less oil for every increase in GDP. So GDP has to come up, inventories have to be consumed, and people really want to consume oil. So aviation, transportation, industry, a variety of things like that. I do think, however, there is a much bigger overlay on this today, and that is people's great concern about climate and the use of hydrocarbons, which generate both methane and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and increase global climate change. I believe this is something that will carry on, and in terms of behavior, I do think people are beginning to reflect on viruses creating health problems, creating lung problems, and on one hand, and secondly on natural phenomena like viruses coming to do things which are far more powerful than presidents or prime ministers can do to human beings. Climate change will be one of those things. So it wouldn't surprise me that over the period that we're talking about now, the medium term, that climate change will remain a very important damper on the consumption of crude oil.
That was former BP head Lord John Brown speaking with our colleague Alex Steele. And now I'm told we have the connection reestablished with Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa. Thank you so much for your patience, sir. We have some difficulty sometimes with these phones. What we were talking about, Senator Grassley, before we got interrupted, was how things are going in Iowa, and specifically with small businesses, including some of your farmers. What is the situation in Iowa right now?
Well, first of all, I think there's about $3 billion came to how many thousands of small businesses, I'm not sure I can tell you. But it was, there's still a lot of demand for it in Iowa. And I think in Iowa, probably more than in metropolitan areas, small business is the backbone of our economy. And I think the really soft spot in Iowa is agriculture, because commodity prices globally are way down, and the price of our grains are historically low if you consider an inflation factor. And we have some viruses in our meat packing plants, and they're not operating at 100% of efficiency. And, you know, there's kind of a very sophisticated, precise line that you go through from a baby pig being born till 5 months later, slaughtering it and getting it to your mouth. And what do you do when you've got thousands of pigs that maybe can't be slaughtered because the packing plants aren't operating at capacity? And it's getting to be a problem. And we hope we don't have to euthanize some of our livestock. But what do? You don't turn 250-pound pig into a 500-pound pig and expect to get quality meat out of it, and you don't have room for new pigs being born. So it's really the most immediate problem we have, and it's caused by the pandemic, with a large share of the workers at the packing plants getting the virus.
And Senator Grassley, there's $19 billion coming the way of farmers, which I know are so critically important, as you suggest, in Iowa. How far will that remedy some of the problems that you're seeing right now in the food processing sector?
It could end up being a spit in the ocean compared to what's going to be needed. But right now, that's what we're dealing with. And for we've got to get it out to the farmers faster than it looks like the federal government's got to do it. When I call up the Secretary of Agriculture, they talk about software problems, getting new regulations through the red tape in Washington, D.C., and I think the Secretary of Agriculture is very, very sincere about getting this money out, and he's very frustrated with not being able to get it out faster. But quite frankly, it needs to be out here faster. Not well into May has been indicated to me.
So, Senator Grassley, this is not the time to worry about it, but sooner or later we're going to have to worry about how we're going to pay for all this money going out. Is it inevitable that we're going to have to raise taxes, state taxes as well as federal taxes down the road, to pay for what we are doing for good and sufficient reason right now?
Well, I think what you got to look at is, first of all, we aren't spending the money just because we love to spend money. This is the first time in the 240-year history of our country that the government, federal, state, and local, has shut down the economy. So we're the fault of it. We got to get it back up and running. And if we didn't get back up and running, we'd be in worse shape than the question you're asking me. Now, your question you're asking me is a very legitimate one. And will it require increases in taxes? I think the answer to that question is directly related to the ability of the economy to handle the debt, because our country's always had some debt. So for 50 years, that was about 35% of gross national product. It's going to be about 100% of gross national product pretty soon. The last time that happened was World War II. So as long as interest rates are below the economic growth of the country, I don't think we have a problem. I don't think we have to increase taxes. If that would inverse itself, then I think we need to think about raising taxes.
Okay, Senator, I really appreciate your being with us and also your patience with our technical difficulties. That is Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa. Coming up here, we're going to be talking with the Energy Secretary, Dan Brouillette, about plans to try to save the U.S. energy industry. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
There are times when you have to.
We're all having to get used to the new normal. And at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new Steady Rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. And coming back from break, we now have some breaking news on the Bloomberg that an interim stimulus deal is done, according to Trump administration officials, something we were just talking with Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa. So we have a report now from the administration that that deal is done. They're supposed to vote on it in the Senate this afternoon. In the meantime, the other big story, of course, is oil and what has gone on with the oil markets in the last 2 days. It's been chaotic, I think it's fair to say. Earlier today, President Trump commissioned his Energy Secretary, Dan Brouillette, as well as his Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, to try to figure out a way to help the oil industry in the United States. And now I'm delighted to say we have that Secretary of Energy, Dan Brouillette, with us. So thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for joining us. Give us a sense of where you start in figuring out how to deal with a situation we've never seen before in the oil business.
Well, thank you, David. It's great to be back with you. Yes, it is an extraordinary situation that we're looking at in the marketplace today. You saw the numbers from yesterday. I don't think anyone, at least in my lifetime, has seen anything near that or like that. We're taking very aggressive but appropriate steps to help the industry and help this economy, if you will, get through this pandemic. One of the steps that we took initially was to open up the strategic reserve, make the storage available to the industry. That's what drove some of the pricing yesterday. You'll note that the folks who were closing out those futures contracts couldn't take possession of the oil because, candidly, they had no place to put it. So storage is a very acute concern all throughout the industry. We've now contracted to take approximately 23 million barrels of oil, put that into the strategic reserve. You also saw the president's tweet. I'm going to work closely with Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin to see what we might do to look at the laws and the facilities that Congress has directed us to create, the lending facilities, the Main Street lending program, other types of facilities. There's a Federal Reserve facility as well, to ensure that those are available to the energy industry as well. So we're working very closely together to ensure that all of the folks in the producing community have access to those types of loans, that type of liquidity, because right now that's another acute concern that we have.
So as you go about approaching this very difficult question, how do you strike the proper balance between, on the one hand, I know you've said it before, the president said it, you want to maintain a free enterprise system. You don't want the government just controlling these markets. On the other hand, you have to save the energy industry. How can you preserve the private sector at the same time that you save it?
Well, it's a very difficult balance we're trying to strike. The market is ruthlessly efficient at weeding out high-cost producers. And in America, we honor the free market system. It's what has brought us to where we are today as a country, and that is a free and independent nation. So we want to continue that as we move forward. That being said, there are market anomalies that happen from time to time, and no one could have predicted the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic that we're all facing. And as we talked about in the past, the demand curve has moved so quickly in a downward fashion that the production is simply not able to keep up with it. It's not able to ramp down as quickly as the demand curve is ramped down. So as a result, we're dealing with this oversupply of oil. So our intent is to look at what we can do, things like the storage that we just talked about, but also with regard to some of the things that, Congress has generously provided this industry. Taking advantage of, perhaps deducting losses that are incurred this year against the last 5 years of profits. Those are important liquidity tools that we're going to help the industry take advantage of.
Mr. Secretary, what about curtailing some of the supply? That is to say, for example, banning imports of oil, particularly from Saudi Arabia. That's something that's been mentioned in the press. May not be on your agenda.
Sure. The president has not taken any of those options off the table. He will continue to evaluate the situation at whatever time is appropriate. He'll make those decisions. But he has stated repeatedly, and I'll state it again, he will avail himself to any option available to him to help this important industry make it through this pandemic. With regard to the imports of oil, it's important to remember that certain refineries in the United States are set up to take specific types of oil. And there's a fundamental difference between, being dependent upon the import of oil as we were in 1973 and 1974, and simply trading oil, which is what you see in the marketplace today. Many refiners choose to import heavy sour crude because that's, for them, the most efficient, most economical way to maintain a profitable status for their businesses. But that's trade. That is not dependent. It's not dependent on the imports.
Right. Okay, Mr. Secretary, I really appreciate you being with us. As I say, you've got a lot on your platter right now trying to figure out what to do about the oil sector. That is Secretary Dan Brouillette. He is the Secretary of Energy. Coming up next, we're going to have a second hour of Balance of Power over on Bloomberg Radio. We're going to talk, among other things, with Bill Richardson, who knows North Korea terribly well, having traveled there often as an emissary, often to try to get the release of U.S. prisoners of the North Korean regime. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Radio, the second hour. That does it for Balance of Power on television for today. I'm David Weston.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury in the time of coronavirus. As global tourism collapses, collateral damage has hit the flower industry. Global demand for cut flowers worth hundreds of millions of dollars, from Thai orchids to Dutch tulips and Kenyan roses, has plummeted as much as 95%. Millions of flowers are being thrown out daily with no buyers and no flights to export them on. Meanwhile, COVID-19 has brought a new must-have asset to the wealthy suburb of Greenwich, a short-term home rental. Manhattanites seeking an immediate escape from the outbreak's epicenter are bidding up leases on mansions in the Connecticut town, some upwards of $50,000 a month. Greenwich's average rental is now over $15,000 a month, nearly double a year ago. Also still moving, classic cars. Auto prices across the board may have fallen 10% and used car sales 64%. But among serious collectors, the world upheaval means deals. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio. You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labor market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand-washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize